What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and today we are going to take a look at Chancellor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, one of the most interesting leaders in the game and the latest installment in my Force 5 series, where I'm playing at least 5 games with every Twilight of the Republic leader and reporting back. So let's get right into it. So Palpatine is one of the most unusual leaders. So let's just go over his text here. He is a cunning heroism leader at first. So Chancellor Palpatine playing both sides, Cunning Heroism. This leader starts the game with this side face up. As an action, you can exhaust, and if a friendly Heroism unit was defeated this phase, draw a card, heal 2 damage from your base, then flip this leader. So when you flip him over, though, he doesn't become a unit. He flips over into a different leader card, Darth Sidious playing both sides, Cunning Villainy this time, and as an action exhaust, if you played a Villainy card this phase, create a Clone Trooper token, deal 2 damage to each enemy base, and then flip this leader. So you go back to the first side. So he is the first Heroism Villainy leader. He's the first leader with no unit side. He has a really powerful value engine as long as you can keep flipping from one side to the other, but he's weird to build a deck for, and there are some major consistency issues. So I found these to be interesting things to try and tackle. I've probably played way more than 5 games with Palpatine now. I probably played like 20 plus games or something. I don't know what the exact number is, but I found him to be really interesting. I don't feel like I have a build that's incredibly locked on, but I've been having a lot of fun playing him, and I wanted to share what I've found so far. So here's the core play pattern with Palpatine, and aka Sidious. You start on the left with Chancellor Palpatine playing both sides. You play an initial heroism unit. So all my initial 2-drop units are heroism. All those cards that I'm playing on the first turn, they're heroism cards. So let's say I play that Battlefield Marine. Then I want to get that unit killed so that I can flip over to Darth Sidious and get some value. And then once I'm on Darth Sidious, on the next turn, I want to play a Villainy card and then flip Darth Sidious back to Palpatine, creating a clone token. And then I can just keep this cycle going. And in some cases, I can actually skip the part where I have to play an additional heroism unit, because the clone token that I created when I flipped Darth Sidious back to Chancellor Palpatine, if I can get that guy killed on the next turn, that can be the friendly heroism unit that was defeated that allows me to flip my leader again. So it's a really interesting play pattern, in my opinion. These clone trooper tokens, it's I think it's very lore appropriate, because you have this sense of, Palpatine is sacrificing these clones as part of his greater plan or whatever, and that's kind of how it feels in the game too. Sometimes you're even kind of looking for ways to get your own guys killed. And in the ideal situation, when you flip Sidious back to Palpatine and get that clone trooper token, the opponent doesn't have any way to deal with it, and then on the next turn you can deal with the clone trooper either through combat or through some other means, which we'll discuss later in the video. And that makes flipping back to Sidious a lot easier, because you don't have to play a heroism unit and then get it killed. However, there are also some situations where the opponent can potentially clear out the clone trooper token that you made before you get to the next turn. So for example, if you're in a scenario where let's say you flip from Sidious to Palpatine, and then the opponent plays an ambush unit or something and defeats the clone trooper that you just had, and now you don't have a heroism unit on the board, and you might be in some trouble when it comes to trying to get a friendly heroism unit defeated on the next turn. So it's more reliable to get those flips going if you flip back from Sidious to Palpatine after your opponent has already taken the initiative, or after, maybe their resources are exhausted, maybe they just don't have any relevant threats to your clone trooper. But you do have to think a bit about whether your opponent's going to be able to clear that out in a way that will prevent you from getting the value out of it in the future. If you have other heroism units that have stuck around on the field, that can help. Maybe one of those is defeated. It doesn't have to be a clone trooper, but getting the Palpatine flips is really important for this deck. If you're not doing that, I think you're really far behind in some ways, because most decks get a big power spike when they flip their leader into a unit, and with no leader unit, this deck has to find that power in other ways. So that's where we're at with this, and it's an interesting scenario. One thing that I found is that in order to improve your consistency, a key piece of the puzzle is finding ways to kill your own units. So sometimes you play that starting unit, your opponent, let's say, I play a Battlefield Marine, my opponent plays a Battlefield Marine, great. I can just trade my Marine for his Marine on the next turn. Now I have a friendly heroism unit that's been defeated. I can start flipping. It seems great. But sometimes, maybe your opponent is going to go to space. Maybe your opponent is like missed their turn one play. Maybe they're running a deck that doesn't have very many units, or the units just don't line up so that they trade with each other evenly. So a key piece of the puzzle is having ways to kill your own units so that you're not relying on your opponent playing into what you want to do. One of the things that I found that's been really good for that has been exploit. So in particular, this Geonosis Patrol Fighter here on the left side is really good for setting up those flips because it's a 5-cost unit with exploit, and it's not Villainy. Most exploit units, I believe, are Villainy. The Geonosis Patrol Fighter, though, is not, and that means that turn 1, you play your heroism unit. Turn 2, now you have 3 resources. You can play the Geonosis Patrol Fighter, use exploit to defeat your own heroism unit to discount it down to 3, potentially bounce an opposing unit while you do this, and now you've enabled that flip. So the Geonosis Patrol Fighter is excellent. The actual stats and ability are pretty relevant too, but the most relevant thing about the Geonosis Patrol Fighter is just that it is a 5-cost exploit unit that isn't Villainy, and so it gives you a more reliable way to get your own unit cleared. This Infiltrating Demolisher that I'm showing here is also useful, but because it does have the Villainy aspect, you can't play it on the second turn in the same way that you can with the Geonosis Patrol Fighter. However, it can still be useful. Let's say that you miss the opportunity to get a friendly heroism unit killed on turn 2. It goes to turn 3. And on turn 3, you can play the Infiltrating Demolisher, exploit one of your units, and that will make up for the aspect penalty you would have for not being Villainy at that time. Other cards can help too. There's other situations where this is good. Infiltrating Demolisher is cool because it's also a card. It's one of the few exploit units that isn't bad if you play it without exploit. A lot of exploit cards are very inefficient without exploit, but Infiltrating Demolisher, a 4/5 Saboteur for 4, is actually pretty reasonable. And so sometimes you can get the ideal sequence where, let's say, turn 1, play a Battlefield Marine, turn 2, attack with the Marine, and then use Geonosis Patrol Fighter, exploit it, defeat it, and then flip. And then turn 3, play the Infiltrating Demolisher for 4, and then flip again. So, I think it's pretty cool. And this is key for consistency, both in general and also versus people who arena dodge you in particular. So if the opponent goes space and you're on the ground and they don't have any ground units for you to trade into, you're going to need a way to get your own units cleared to start that Palpatine Sidious flip train. So that was one thing that I found to be important, and it's possible I'll even want more cards like this in the deck in the future. Unfortunately, there aren't very many cards that are ideal in this circumstance, but there are at least some. This is the deck that I ended up building. It is a command deck, and I am on the 30 HP base. I had tested with Energy Conversion Lab. I think Energy Conversion Lab is a really good card, but the funny thing was I ended up building a deck where so many things actually had ambush already that I didn't find the Energy Conversion Lab was necessarily what I wanted, and I liked having the extra HP against more aggressive builds. So as you can see, I was discussing this earlier, but all my turn 1 units are Heroism. And then we have a mix of heroism and villainy units after that. So, we have a lot of ambushers in particular, and ambushers are good, especially heroism ambushers, because first off, ambush is a great keyword, but in this deck, they're extra good because they potentially offer other opportunities to get friendly heroism units killed. So for example, let's say it's a bit later in the game, and I flipped from Sidious to Palpatine, but the opponent killed my clone, and now I'm on Palpatine. I don't have a heroism unit in play. How am I going to get a heroism unit killed? Well, maybe I can play a Battlefield Marine and then exploit it or whatever with the Patrol Fighter, but another thing that I could do is play a unit like the modded Cohort, maybe just crash into an enemy unit and trade with it, and then, hey, I just played a heroism unit, and a friendly heroism unit got defeated. So the ambush keyword lets you kind of speed that up a bit. So there are a lot of ambush cards. I also have a bunch of ambush villain cards. Now, it is worth noting that to flip from Villainy to Heroism, you just have to play any Villainy card. It doesn't have to be a unit, and that's why I have more Villainy events and stuff than I do Heroism ones. So, No Good to Me Dead, Merciless Contest, Overwhelming Barrage, all of those are Villainy cards. They aren't units, but that's fine because you don't need to have a Villainy unit get killed. You don't have to have your Villainy card get killed at all. You just have to play a Villainy card to flip from Sidious to Palpatine. Then we do also have a fairly powerful end game with the reinforcements, walkers, Han, Maul. There's some cool stuff here. Now I want to say this is not a finely tuned deck. I don't really have a real sideboard. I do have a few cards specified in the sideboard, but I don't even have 10 cards there, and it's mostly just extra copies of cards that I have in the deck that I think are good but a little more situational. So maybe you would play the extra elite P-38 Starfighter if you were against an opponent who is weak to ping damage, or maybe you would play, the extra Bright Hope and Marauder against opponents that had a lot of space presence, things like that. But I should say I've been having a ton of fun with this deck. It's been really cool to be playing around with this. I'll probably play with it more, after having made this video because I think it's such an interesting composition. And yeah, like I was just discussing, the heroism cards you're bringing in do need to be units. And there are a bunch of heroism units in here as a result, because now you can run heroism cards that aren't units. So like if I wanted to play, Spare the Target instead of Waylay, I could do that, but it doesn't help me flip. And I think in some cases, I would rather have the flexibility of a card that I can play regardless of which side I happen to be on at the time. So I believe all the heroism cards in the deck right now are units. That they don't have to be that way. If there's a heroism upgrade or event that you really want to play, put it in. But like you need heroism units to get your flips going. Then the Villainy cards, like I was saying, don't have to be units. No Good to Me Dead, Merciless Contest, Overwhelming Barrage. Very good cards in my view. And Merciless Contest is interesting here because it's kind of it's kind of a worse version of Power of the Dark Side, but in this deck, sometimes it's a better version of Power of the Dark Side. Let's say I only have one heroism unit. I don't have a way to get it killed normally. Well, Merciless Contest killing my own unit might actually be quite favorable, even if I'm playing it out of aspect in order to get those flips. So it's a weird deck. It doesn't play the same way as other decks that I've played, but I found it to be a really fun way to play Star Wars Unlimited, and I'm looking forward to doing some more exploration with Palpatine. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think this deck is no good? Do you think Palpatine's the worst leader ever and it's not even fun? I don't know. I personally think it's really cool. And I think other colors have some interesting stuff too. Maybe you play Palpatine Red and you use Heroic Sacrifice as another way to get your early units killed. That could be really effective. Maybe you play Palpatine Blue and you have more of a control endgame type plan with some of the heavier removal cards. With Palpatine Blue, you could potentially be playing things like, all those blue removal pieces that are neither heroism nor villainy. You play Takedown, Fell the Dragon, all that type of stuff. Maybe you use those, and that creates a scenario where you have some reliable stuff, even if you're not cycling back and forth in the way that you would normally want. Maybe even Palpatine Double Yellow, play the Chancellor Palpatine unit, and play that card that makes battle droids or whatever. I don't know. These are just some speculations, but I have found Chancellor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, to be one of the most fun and interesting leaders in the game, and it makes me excited to see what they're going to do with this stuff in the future. So yeah, it's a fun time to be playing Star Wars Unlimited. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more. Also, if you guys have suggestions as to the next leader that I should cover in the Force 5 series, let me know. I just have been playing a bunch of Palpatine games, and I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do next. So, let me know what you find appealing. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.